gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker for the day is Dr. William Cope. He is the professor in the Department of Education Policy Studies at the University of Illinois. He is the principal investigator in major projects funded by the Institute of Educational Science in the U.S. Department of Education, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. William Cope is a professor in the Department of Educational Policy Studies at the University of Illinois. Let's go ahead and welcome him on board.
Talk about is the future of online learning. And a little history at the start about this process of digital transformation, which has actually been going on for a long time. Here at the University of Illinois, the people who were before me invented the world's first e-learning system, a system called Plato, and that was 1959, just over 60 years ago. So in fact, these digital transformations have been going on for a very, very, very long time. Then in 1998 at our university here at the University of Illinois, on the right there's an image of Mosaic, the world's first web browser. And then on the left, the program that I teach in is the world's first fully online degree, 1998. So 1998, look, that's 23 years ago. So it's been a long set of transformations. And then in 2012, we at the University of Illinois here, I'm talking about our experience at this university, we got involved in MOOCs. These are the Coursera MOOCs. Our university's now had nearly 5 million enrollments. And on the left is a series of MOOCs that I offer. All my courses are online, and folks, you'd all be welcome to do it. So all my courses I teach in the university are fully online in MOOCs as well. And there's 9 education courses. A lot of them around, one of the most popular courses is actually around this question of e-learning. Now, and then on the right here, this is my program. And in fact, we offer a fully online doctorate. So, we offer master's degrees, certificates, doctorates, the whole way through. So this has been a big transformation, but a long transformation. It's taken a number of years. Now, online learning arrives, and does the world change? No. A lot of the time, things in the world stay exactly the same. So on the right is B.F. Skinner's teaching machine of 1954, where the lone learner is answering questions by herself. And here we have all the children in the classroom sitting in rows in the traditional way, with the teacher at the front of the room, not talking to each other, doing their own work. And in fact, what we've done in pedagogical terms is we've introduced these technologies, and the old classroom has stayed the way it is. So what's the architecture of that old classroom? Well, here's the typical architecture. It's a hub and spoke model. It's kind of a wheel where there are students out there, teacher in the middle. And John Dewey, the very famous American philosopher, called this transmission learning. Or Paulo Freire, the famous Brazilian educator, called this banking education. It's like giving money to a bank and it gets deposited and it gets kept. And it's one size fits all. Everybody's doing the same textbook, listening to the same teacher, all at the same time. Now, what we argue in the work that we've been doing at the University of Illinois is that, in fact, there are profound possibilities that are possible in e-learning, which were always hard to do in conventional classroom environments. So, and this is an argument we have about 7 e-learning affordances, things that we can do now because e-learning makes them possible and makes them easier. So, multimodal meaning, we can do our learning work in these multimodal environments with image and video and sound. Recursive feedback, we can build new feedback systems where we're giving feedback to the learners, formative assessment. Collaborative intelligence, where the learners work together on knowledge work. Metacognition, thinking about your thinking, is facilitated in these environments. Differentiated learning, not everybody has to be on the same page at the same time. Ubiquitous learning, anywhere, anytime. You don't have to be in the classroom to keep learning. And active knowledge making, where you're actually building not just a passive receptor of knowledge. These are 7 possibilities. Now, what I'm going to do briefly now is I'm going to take you into an environment that we've been building with the grants that our introductory person mentioned at the beginning, from the Gates Foundation and from the Institute of Educational Sciences and the National Science Foundation. We've been building this application called Scholar, and I want to show you a different way of doing things. And to do that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I am going to go in and share again live the Scholar web application. So now we are on the web, and this is the Scholar login. So this is a web-based, purely web-based application. You can access it from any web browser on any device. And when I sign into this, I come in first into a space called community, which is an activity stream, which is an infinite scroll of things that's happening in my various courses, either as a teacher or as a learner, and with all my peers. I don't have friends or followers. That's a terrible idea in education. Conventional social media is really badly calibrated for education. I have peers. And when I go into one of my communities, I don't have classes, I have communities. This is a post that I've made to one of my communities. In fact, it's one that I've made just now to a class which is called EBS Y560, which is a class about technology and learning. And I've actually put up my thoughts about these digital affordances, exactly the ideas that I just showed you now for my students in my class. And there's the diagram, and I've got a table, and I've put in a video here. I've made a short flipped classroom video which describes, it's only 4 minutes long, a short video, and I've put in an article that I've written about this particular subject. And then I've asked all the students to comment, and see below, every student has commented, and they're writing a substantial comment, right? Now, in a normal classroom, I might give a lecture and I might hand out a handout for people to read, but not everybody can speak. And one of the remarkable things about these environments is that everybody can speak, and I can know whether they've watched the video, because to write something substantial like this, you've got to have watched the video, right? So otherwise you're going to look a fool to your peers in this class. So there's an example of a new way of managing the classroom. The next thing I'm going to show you is, in this classroom, I also expect the students to contribute knowledge. So this is not about me transmitting knowledge, it's about co-designing knowledge, the teacher and the students. So here's an example of the students past that posted, and I just happened to go looking for this now a couple of minutes ago. This has just been posted by one of my students about smart music, which is one of these digital tools. So what this student has done is they've posted a short video about smart music. So if their peers don't know about that, there's the video. And then they posted some diagrams. This is their class, and they've scrubbed out their students' names because they shouldn't be sharing those. And then they've used these concepts, ubiquitous learning, multimodal learning, recursive feedback, collaborative intelligence, metacognition. They've used our concepts to parse or analyze what's happening in smart music. So I'm not a music teacher. I don't know smart music so well, but they've brought their expert knowledge, and they've used our scaffolds to analyze some of the work that they do as a music teacher. I have all sorts of people in my classes. Some are music teachers, some are math teachers, some are in higher education, some are in K-12 schools, and so on. But look below, here are the other students discussing that work, right? So, so there we have a new form of classroom discussion, and whether you are in person or remote, these kinds of ways of recording interactions are the way of the future. They're integral to what we do. Now, what I'm going to do in this Scholar environment is I'm going to go and show you another area. This is an area called Community, which, if you like, is the classroom. I'm going to show you this area called Creator. And this is where people do extended piece of work, works like projects. So here's a project about collaborative learning. And see here, this is a multimodal environment where the students writing in their essay, they can put in videos in line, they can put in any digital media in line. And you can see here that this particular student has put in videos, a number of videos along the way, put in some infographics along the way, and this is a very substantial piece of work. This is what the 21st century essay looks like. There's the critique, gaps in the literature, then there are the references. It's a conventional piece of work in a lot of ways. But except it's multimodal, that word I was using before. Now, let me go over here now. And while they're doing their work, they are able to see a rubric, which is, this is how they're going to be measured when it comes to peer review and self-review and teacher review, okay? And here then, and this, by the way, if I was to do a review on this now as a teacher, I just pull the slider across. I think it's a 2 out of 4. Here's some good, a rubric with rating level descriptions. If you write clear rating level descriptions, you get good inter-rater reliability. And then here are the results after peer review. This is the first person's comments. This is the second person's comments. And here we have a whole pile of annotations where people have written different comments all the way through. And you can see here, you can jump to that place in the text to see what the comment is. So this is a highly interactive process, but the most important thing is we've crowdsourced assessment. Everybody is assessing each other, and it helps their learning. It's a formative assessment. It's about incrementally improving the work that you do. So here's the important part. We've got all sorts of activities happening here in this. In fact, all the work that the students do is entirely in this environment. And we're data mining that all the time. So this is in fact that class that you saw before. And this is the whole class. Now, in fact, every single student has their own one of these analytics tools. It's called an aster plot. An aster is a type of daisy, and these are all the petals along the way. And see here, this is the average percent score you received on your work through peer reviews, right? Now, I'm looking at the whole class now. But if the student wants to go in and see exactly how their performance is being measured, they can go there. So we have all these different measures. These are the updates they've made, the comments they've made on other people's work. There's a lot of interaction going on, and it's possible to dig down and see what's happening in this space. Now look here, in this class, I don't know, 30, 40 students from memory. By the end of the class, there were, which was an 8-week class, there were nearly 6,500 pieces of actionable feedback amongst the peers. As a teacher, I could never do that. But I built this collaborative e-learning environment where the peers and the machine and all our interactions together produce 6,000 pieces of actionable feedback on 1.5 million data points. Impossible in a regular environment. And it's only because we're collecting every interaction the students have, and we're data mining that. And we're measuring it on 3 measures. One is knowledge, which is what is the stuff that you've learned. Another is focus, is how much work have you done? But the third one, and the very important one, is help, a measure of collaboration. You're in a collaborative knowledge environment. And by the way, all these settings, the weighting of each, the width of each petal is the weighting we're giving it, and the length is what our target expectations are as a teacher. Doesn't take long for a teacher to set this up, 15 minutes or so. And this, the color here is the progress the whole class has made towards those objectives, but every student has their own measure of what's going on. So one last thing I'm going to show you in the software before I go back to my PowerPoint and draw some conclusions. We have in our bookstore area hundreds and hundreds of learning modules which work in this format. And this is how a learning module works. It's got kind of 2 columns. It's an object which is made in Scholar. So what happens is on the left-hand side, I have chunks of content that I'm going to deliver to the students. So here's a video I'm going to deliver, and here's a chunk of content here. And to deliver this into every student's activity stream, all I do is I go and select the relevant that particular community, and then I go continue, and every student gets that delivered into their social media style activity stream back here. So that's roughly how this architecture works. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my my web browser now. I'm going to go back and I'm going to share my PowerPoint in order to draw some conclusions. There's the PowerPoint. Okay. So again, this is Scholar. If anybody would like to use it, it's available. We have a not-for-profit in the university, which makes it accessible to people at a pretty low cost. But if you're a researcher, you can use it for without charge. Just need to talk to us about that. So that's the Scholar application. Now, what I want to do is I want to conclude in the last few minutes I have in this talk with 6 learning transformations. Well, firstly, that little diagram, hub and spoke model, becomes a very, very, very interactive environment. Secondly, equitable learning. Now, this is the classic, norm-based distribution curve. But what we argue is these environments every student can achieve, because you can see your astropod, you can see where you're up to. And if you keep working at something and you keep, trying and you mightn't be all at the same point at every time, but it's possible to push that curve over towards the right. Engaged learning, which is learning where you're actively doing things. You're not just sitting in a classroom listening to a teacher speaking. You're actively building knowledge and actively interacting with the other students. Deep learning, which is, here's the traditional learning model. You've got the students there and they're answering these ABCD answers. That's not deep learning. That's just memory. I managed to remember something, or I've got a procedure and I've got it right. And we know how fraught that is. That's not really terribly deep learning as well, which is critical, creative, design thinking, all of those things. My 5th point is recursive learning. So what our ambition is here is quite an ambitious objective, is to end the distinction between formative and summative assessment. In other words, every bit of assessment you've got is for learning. It's not retrospective of learning. It's not retrospective and judgmental. It's prospective and constructive, right? And what we want to do is end this distinction between learning and assessment. Everything you're doing is being assessed by data mining and learning analytics, the technologies that you just saw in action. And there's no need for assessment at the end, because we have so much data about what you did during the program or during the course. And we're working at the moment around in the area of artificial intelligence and synergistic machine learning, where the machine learns from all the things that you're doing and gives you useful feedback. So my final point is, okay, there are 5 learning transformations. It changes the job of teaching. Teachers are more important than ever. And also they're more productive than ever. The boring, silly things they did with, reading the same assignment 30 times at the end of the course, which was a deadly boring thing to do. Now you've got these productivity tools where the machine is involved in assessment, and assessment becomes a much easier thing to do, much more thorough, much more comprehensive, but also much easier. And it transforms our work in all sorts of ways. So there's my conclusion. The future of online learning is actually the future of all learning, in the sense that we would use exactly the same infrastructure for in-person classes, and we would and we do, as what we do for remote classes. We need these kinds of transformations across the board. So that's my my argument. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm happy to answer questions. I will look in the chat if there are any questions in the chat. Can we use the Scholar software on cellular phones? Yes, you can. However, there's a lot of stuff happening here. So it's accessible on mobile phones, but there's a lot of stuff happening here, and it's better to have a bigger screen if at all possible, but it is accessible via a laptop. Good question about how do you make sure that everybody assesses others fairly. What we have is we have kind of little check mechanisms in there. So one is the person doing the assessment, the student doing the assessment, gets a rating by the assessor, right? So in a lot of social media systems, this is how they work. So there's a kind of a assessment that's going on where the assessor gets assessed. So, for example, a student puts in a score, puts in some feedback, and then the person who's receiving the feedback writes a review of the review and gives a score on the assessment. So if you do unfair assessment, you're going to get a score which reflects the fact the other person thinks it's unfair. Now, the other thing is that there are reporting mechanisms as well, where if you think it's unfair, you can report it to the instructor. So they're the kinds of checks that are in the system to ensure that everyone's being fair. What's the future of digital learning? Well, the future of digital learning is possibly a huge transformation. So one of the things that, the image I showed of the classroom with all the computer screens and everybody sitting in a row, that's not the future of digital learning. That's the past of all learning, right? The future of digital learning is these kinds of tools are able to do the 7 things in those 7 affordances: recursive feedback, collaborative learning, deep thinking, and also the points I made at the end of the talk. Big transformations. And my argument is this is the biggest transformation since the invention of modern forms of schooling. And modern forms of schooling were invented nearly 200 years ago, which is the classroom, the teacher at the front, the textbook. All of these things get completely transformed. That's the biggest change that's happened. Now, by the way, what we often do in digital learning is we produce the teacher talking in a video. We produce the textbook in an e-textbook. We produce the old-fashioned test. We reproduce the old-fashioned test in an ABCD online test, and nothing changes. So one of my arguments is, how can things be profoundly different? Challenges in educational systems in terms of switching technologies and upgrading. I mean, one of the big challenges, a lot of the technologies are just frankly not very good. So you might buy an expensive learning management system, and I'm a researcher in this area, and I'm telling you, they're not very good. And they don't really explore what the potentials are in this environment. What's more effective, face-to-face or remote? Look, that's another very good question there. So the question of both remote and face-to-face can be effective, and also they can both be ineffective, right? And one of our arguments is that the differences between, the changes that I've been advocating and speaking about in this talk have to happen both for face-to-face and remote, and they're essentially the same changes. Summative assessment, right. So summative assessment is you finish the course and you do a test, 2 or 3 hour sample. So summative comes at the end of a period of learning and it's retrospective, it's looking back. Formative assessment is giving you feedback which helps you improve your work. That's the difference. The next question. Okay, that's great. Great. Now, recursive learning means feedback loops, right? It's not, so classical assessment is linear. You do the course and then at the end you get an assessment, linear, point of learning, point of assessment. Recursive feedback is lots of small amounts of feedback on which you can take action, where you can do things, right? So recursive feedback is feedback where you can act on that feedback and then get further feedback on the actions that you've taken. So it's about cycles of feedback. So that's what that concept is. It's a huge shift from traditional assessment, and it's made possible by these new disciplines and practices of educational data mining and learning analytics, which are new technologies and new practices, which we're predicting will become an essential part of learning in the not too distant future. Any more questions, folks? Okay, well, look, thank you, everybody. I hope that's been a useful presentation, a useful talk. As I say, if anybody wants to use Scholar, I'll put my email address in the chat. So if anybody is interested to follow up and become a Scholar user, you'd be very, very welcome. I just want to check I've spelled that correctly. Okay, I've spelled that correctly. So that's my email address. Feel free to contact me if you're interested to.
It was a pleasure having you on our platform. Thank you for coming and sharing insights. I'm sure everybody is delighted to have you on board and to listen to your session. Thank you so much once again.